How long can we wait for this coffee of yours? A respectable man in an expensive suit, sitting at a table by the window, shouted irritably. Just a minute ago, quiet conversations and soft music were heard in the cozy restaurant hall, but now a tense silence fell. Several visitors involuntarily turned around at the sharp cry. The man threw a linen napkin on the table with force and stared discontentedly at the waitress standing in front of him with a tray. The man looked about 45 years old. An expensive watch sparkled on his wrist, and his facial expression was clearly arrogant. The woman named Natalia did everything possible to remain calm. She understood the client's dissatisfaction. He really did wait a little longer than usual. It was a difficult day. An hour before the establishment's peak workload, one of the waitresses felt ill and left her shift. And the coffee machine at the bar suddenly broke down, and they had to spend some time repairing it. Natalia, being the manager and owner of the establishment, did not hesitate, put on a waitress uniform and went out into the hall to help her colleagues. She was torn between several tables and tried to personally control that coffee was prepared for this guest as quickly as possible. But the tone in which the man was now expressing his irritation was offensive. Natalia smiled politely, trying to look unperturbed, although in her soul she was seething with indignation. Quote, "I apologize for the wait," she said softly, carefully placing a cup of so brewed aromatic cappuccino in front of the man. "We have a very busy evening today, but as an apology, the coffee will be on the house." Quote, "It would seem that ordinary words of apology should have softened the situation." Natalia really did her best to speed up the service. She even had to personally deal with the coffee machine on the bar counter for a few minutes, which was acting up after a sudden failure. However, this did not satisfy the client. He snorted contemptuously, without even looking at the served drink. "So she is the one apologizing," he mimicked loudly for the whole room to hear. "My time is expensive, unlike yours. After all, I did not come here to wait 10 minutes for a cup of coffee. Frankly, your service here is disgusting." Natalia felt her cheeks heat up. She had to deal with demanding guests more than once, especially in expensive establishments. However, she had not heard such rudeness for a long time. It was becoming increasingly difficult to remain polite, but she restrained herself. The experience gained over the years of working in restaurants helped to keep her emotions under control. Quote, "I apologize again," she said with emphasized respect. "I understand your displeasure. If you like, I can also offer you a dessert on the house as compensation for the wait." She hoped that the offer of a free dessert in addition to the coffee would calm the angry customer a little. But the man only seemed to get angrier from her calm tone. "Are you kidding? Do you think I want your stinking dessert?" His face turned red and he jabbed an irritated finger at the saucer and cup. "I want normal service. I pay money and expect service, not your apologies and handouts." Several pairs of eyes in the room watched the conflict unfold. At a distant table, an elderly couple exchanged glances, clearly shocked by the rich man's behavior. The other waiters in the restaurant also noticed the noise and looked uneasily in the direction of Natalia and her scandalous customer. But Natalia gestured to them to understand that the situation was under control and there was no need to interfere, although everything inside her was turning over. This situation affected her not only as a restaurant manager, but also personally. At 40, Natalia has seen a lot in the service industry. She once started as a simple waitress, and she had to endure unfair treatment more than once. She remembered an incident from her youth, when one arrogant customer brought her to tears, insulting her in front of everyone, and the owner of that establishment just waved him off. Like, the customer is always right. Then young Natasha, wiping away tears in the hill, firmly decided that if fate gives her a chance to run her own establishment, she will not allow such customers to humiliate her colleagues with impunity. That is why, many years later, having become the owner of this restaurant, she put at the forefront the culture of respect for both guests and staff. Most of the visitors appreciated the atmosphere she created, and such scandals here happened extremely rarely. But today Natalia had to personally defend her principles. Natalia took a deep breath, trying to speak evenly, although her voice trembled a little from restrained emotions. "Dear, I understand that you are upset. Believe me, we value every guest. Your coffee is already here. It is fresh and prepared to all standards. Perhaps you should try it before it gets cold. And I repeat, it will be on the house." The man pushed his cup away irritably. Quote, "I don't need your coffee. You can drink it yourself," he snapped. "I demand that I be given normal service. Call me the manager, since you yourself are no good for anything." With these words, the client looked Natalia up and down with disdain, as if trying to understand why this waitress had not yet rushed to fulfill his demands. A smug grin played on his lips. "Or better yet, call the owner of the establishment. I don't care who you are. Let them explain to me why there is such a mess here. And in general, I will ask that you be fired." Natalia exhaled quietly. This was the turning point. For a moment, she felt sorry for this man. He did not even suspect what a mistake he was making by addressing her in such a tone. She gave the man a long, searching look and calmly said, "What do you say? Do I understand correctly that you wanted to see the owner of the restaurant?" Quote, the man grinned and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. If there was an owner here at all, he should know how his staff treated customers. I'm sure he'll be very interested to know how his establishment is being disgraced here. The woman nodded. The room was still ringing with silence. Some of the customers were watching the altercation surreptitiously. Natalia straightened her back and took a small badge with her name on it from the breast pocket of her uniform. Waitress Natalia. It was part of the legend chosen for this evening, so as not to attract unnecessary attention from the guests. Slowly, almost solemnly, she placed the badge on the table in front of the man. My name is Natalia Sokolova, she said in a different tone, still even, but with a hint of steel in it. I am the owner of this restaurant. The smug smile instantly disappeared from the man's face. He blinked, looking from the badge to the woman in front of him, as if not believing his ears. What did you say? He asked, leaning forward. You heard everything correctly. Natalia spoke quietly, but every word she said was clearly heard in the frozen silence of the room. I am the owner of this restaurant, and tonight I am working here as a waitress to support my staff during a difficult shift. The man's face first turned red, then blotchy and quickly turned pale. He clearly did not expect such a turn of events. For a few seconds, the rich man sat silently, his mouth open, unable to find anything to say. A light whisper was heard around him. The other guests were discussing the unexpected outcome. Understanding smiles flashed across the faces of several regulars. They knew the owner of the establishment, but did not interfere, watching as she herself put a rude customer in his place. "So you are the owner," he finally squeezed out, frowning. Now there was no longer any self-confidence in his voice. "But how is this possible?" Natalia nodded softly. "Today I am performing the duties of a waitress. You see, when the restaurant is full, I cannot sit with my hands folded. There is nothing shameful for me in helping my team in the kitchen or in the hall." She tilted her head slightly to the side, continuing to stare at the man. "Unfortunately, your behavior leaves much to be desired." The client frantically tried to figure out how to react. Just a minute ago he felt like he was the master of the situation, but now the situation had completely changed. He cleared his throat, vainly collecting his thoughts, and tried to speak more confidently. "Well, since you are the owner," he began much quieter than before, "you can understand why I am outraged. It is unacceptable to make a guest wait so long. Quote, and the coffee, by the way, is already cold." He tried to save face and again play the role of an offended customer, but his words sounded pathetic and unconvincing. Natalia calmly looked at the cup. "If you want, I can ask Borista to make a new one." The man fell silent. He clearly did not want to give up the chosen line of behavior, but also to continue the scandal when the opponent was the hostess herself. He was afraid. Running his hand nervously along the table, he grumbled. "I just waited 5 minutes longer than usual, and I really did not like it." Natalia paused, letting him speak out. Then she stepped closer to the table and quietly, but so that her words were heard by those around her, said, "You demanded to call the owner, and the owner is in front of you. Now let me tell you." The man tensed, feeling intense glances from all sides. Natalia continued in a firm voice. "In my restaurant, everyone really matters guest. We sincerely try to make you feel comfortable, but this does not mean that anyone is allowed to humiliate my employees. Regardless of your status and wealth, no one has yet cancelled the rules of politeness." She spoke calmly, without shouting, but in the silence of the hall her words sounded especially clear. The rich man meanwhile was fiddling with his napkin with his fingers, now redder, now paler from a mixture of irritation and shame. He opened his mouth, as if he was going to object to something. But Natalia slightly raised her palm, stopping him. "I'm not finished yet. Today you did not show your best side. You insulted me and my staff for no reason other than your impatience. I sincerely regret that it happened this way, but I can't ignore it." The man chuckled, trying to smile. "So what now? Are you going to lecture me?" There were notes of bravura in his voice, but it sounded pathetic. Natalia smiled barely noticeably. "Notations are not my method, but I will not continue to serve you in my establishment." She straightened up, looking him straight in the eyes. "I ask you to leave the restaurant after finishing your dinner and not to return here in the future. There is no need to pay the bill, everything will be on the house." A barely audible sigh of surprise ran through the hall. The man turned white. "Are you throwing me out?" "No, I ask you to leave the restaurant after finishing your dinner," Natalia calmly confirmed. "And also to refrain from visiting my establishment for some time. And what's more, I will tell my colleagues from other famous restaurants in the city about today's incident with you. I am sure that no self-respecting establishment would want to accept such guests." The rich man's eyes widened. He rose abruptly from the table, looking in shock at the confident woman opposite him. There was nothing to object to. Under the condemning glances of onlookers, all his confidence was blown away like the wind. Trying to maintain at least a semblance of dignity, he muttered in an uncertain voice, "You'll regret it." But his voice betrayed him and the sentence broke off. Natalia raised an eyebrow questioningly. Quote, "Is there anything else I can help you with?" The client clenched his jaw and looked around. Several people were openly looking at him, shaking their heads, and waved his hand. "No, I don't need anything." Feeling dozens of eyes on him and a painful feeling of shame, he grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair and threw a crumpled napkin on the table. The rich man hurried to the exit, eager to leave this place as quickly as possible. It seemed that just a little more and he would have started running. Natalia stood motionless for a few more seconds, watching the departing visitor. A tense pause reigned in the hall. The silence was broken by that same elderly couple. The gray-haired gentleman quietly said bravo, raising his glass, and his wife quietly clapped her hands. Gradually, the other guests responded with approving glances and a few applause. Natalia felt her cheeks flush again, this time from embarrassment. She nodded to the visitors with a grateful smile, and at that moment the young waitress Alina, who had been watching the scene from afar all this time, holding her breath, was already hurrying towards her. "Natalia Ivanovna, how are you?" she asked almost in a whisper, looking into the hostess's eyes. Natalia turned to the girl and smiled softly. "Everything is fine, Alina, don't worry. Let's continue working." Alina breathed a sigh of relief and hurried back to her work. Several people from the staff had been crowding in the kitchen doorway all this time. The cook and his assistant, the waiters, even the dishwasher stuck their heads out to take a look. They had all seen and heard what had happened, and were now looking at Natalia with genuine respect. The owner of the establishment nodded softly to them, as if to say, "Everything is fine, get back to work." The team quickly went to their places, even more convinced that they were lucky to work under such a fair leader. Natalia ran her hand through her hair, trying to stop the slight trembling in her fingers. Her heart was still beating fast from the surge of adrenaline. It was never easy to face such blatant rudeness, but the duty of a leader required fortitude. She glanced at the table where the untouched, cold cappuccino remained. The steam had long since dissipated, and the aromatic patterns of the milk foam had lost their shape. Natalia took the cup, hesitated a little, and took a sip. The drink had cooled down, but it still tasted good. Her restaurant always served the best coffee. Quote, "It's a pity you never tried it," she said quietly, addressing an invisible interlocutor, as she now imagined that difficult client. "Perhaps then your mood would have improved a little." She carefully put the cup back on the tray, adjusted her uniform and straightened up. The conversations in the hall had already resumed, the clink of dishes, quiet music. The restaurant lived its usual life, as if nothing had happened. But for everyone who witnessed this scene, the lesson was clear. Respect is more important than money. And sometimes you have to pay for arrogance with your own reputation. Natalia sincerely hoped that the scandalous guest himself would understand this someday. Money can do a lot, but respect and decency must be earned by your actions. That same evening, Natalia kept her word. She called several acquaintances, managers of prestigious restaurants in the city, and briefly told her about the incident. Her colleagues fully supported her. No self-respecting restaurateur wanted to have a customer who allowed himself to publicly insult the service staff, thereby disturbing other guests. Each of them promised to instruct their staff to immediately refuse service if this visitor appeared. Colleagues not only supported her decision, but also recalled similar cases. Each of them had to deal with overly arrogant guests from time to time. Each agreed that the reputation of the establishment and mutual respect are much more important than momentary profit. As a result, the scandalous rich man lost the opportunity to visit the best restaurants in the city. At least until he learns to treat people with due respect. If you like this story, do not forget to share it with your loved ones. Like and subscribe so as not to miss new episodes. And write in the comments what city you are listening from. It will be interesting to read.